Welcome to Dark Magic Stories, a supernatural anthology born from shadowed worlds and forgotten power. Tonight's tale: Pruett's Sinister Escapades. Paris, 1846. The streets are wet with secrets. In the shadowed corners of forgotten cathedrals and beneath the city's bones, something stirs: old blood, old magic, and a madness that refuses to die. This is the story of Pruett, a demon haunted by voices, driven by obsession, and keeper of something far darker than a conscience. His companions are bones, his confidant, a severed head in glass. Something is coming for him, and still he hums. Episode 1. Paris in Shadows. 1846, Paris. The city, with its labyrinthine alleys and sprawling boulevards, thrived under a dual rhythm. By day it was a hub of enlightenment and industry. Scholars debating beneath the domes of the Sorbonne, artists sketching the bustling markets of Les Halles. By night, the city shifted into shadowed intrigue. Gas lamps flickered like ghosts along the Seine, their soft light unable to dispel the darkness crawling beneath bridges and behind shuttered windows. Yet their soft glow did little to banish the creeping dark that pooled behind shuttered windows. Footsteps quickened after dusk, doors locked earlier. There were places even the gendarmerie avoided. But deeper still, where mortal eyes dared not wander, an ancient conflict simmered. Paris was not merely the city of light, it was a sanctuary for the supernatural, where death held court under the very noses of humanity. The Dorvo vampires, proud and disciplined, had long claimed Paris as their domain, their strict governance keeping their kind in check. To the Dorvo, Paris was a treasure to be guarded, a jewel of secrecy. To them, Paris was not a city. It was a sacred geometry. Every cathedral bell, every cemetery, and shadowed alley served their order. The Dorvo had ruled in silence for centuries, and among them stood Monsieur Alphonse Beauregard, their king in all but name. Beauregard was no brute nor warrior, but a man of intellect, a keeper of forgotten knowledge, and too trustworthy for his own good. He lived between two masks. By day, behind windows covered from the sun's rays, he was a celebrated intellectual, an eccentric aristocrat who hosted salons in the Marais and lectured on spiritual alchemy to curious minds. Mortals flocked to him. He was safe, polished, academic. By night, the masks fell away. He descended into the earth, to his true sanctuary, hidden within the labyrinthine catacombs beneath Saint-Denis. It was here, among dusty tomes and arcane relics, that whispers of his brilliance spread like wildfire, artifacts that hummed with old power, bones with names. He was the last guardian of things too dangerous to destroy. And it was here that Pruett, the erratic Lamia Dema, set his sights. A creature of appetite and erratic brilliance, infamous among his own kind, unwelcome among others. Where the Dorvo cloaked themselves in elegance, Pruett wore madness like a perfume. He was charming when he wanted to be, scholarly when it suited him, and deadly always. He didn't follow rules, he didn't respect borders. And when he heard whispers of a Dorvo vampire hoarding a special kind of relic, his interest sharpened like a blade. But it wasn't curiosity that drove him. It was hunger, not for blood, but for permanence. Pruett did not crave power in the way most demons did. He craved preservation, of beauty, of brilliance, of something that could not rot. And to him, Monsieur Beauregard represented exactly that. Among humans, the Dorvo was a celebrated intellectual, a man whose lectures on philosophy and alchemy drew the brightest minds of the city. To Pruett, he was an opportunity. Pruett, already infamous among demon for his eccentricity and unpredictability, heard whispers of Beauregard's work, a Dorvo vampire who delved into ancient texts and artifacts that others feared to touch. On this night, his topic was the transmutation of spirit and flesh. The hall was packed, young philosophers in threadbare jackets, aging alchemists with smudged fingers, wide-eyed debutantes hoping for scandal. Beauregard stood at the head of the lecture hall, his tall frame draped in a charcoal frock coat that gleamed faintly under the chandelier's flickering light, his commanding presence filling the space with an effortless authority. The chandelier overhead cast flickering light across the room, creating a kaleidoscope of shifting shadows on the vaulted ceiling. The hall was nearly silent, save for the occasional murmur of awe from the audience. Though Paris was no stranger to gatherings of intellectuals, this was no ordinary lecture. Beauregard, under the guise of an eccentric professor, cultivated a reputation as a thinker on the fringe of science and metaphysics. Tonight, he spoke not of mundane philosophy, but of mysteries that teased at the borders of reality itself. The transmutation of spirit and flesh, his voice reverberating through the hall, is not a trifling matter of alchemy or chemistry. It is the interplay of will and essence, a dialogue between the finite and the infinite. The audience hung on his every word. He had their undivided attention. But one figure among them didn't seek answers. He watched instead. Measured, predatory. Pruett's hair was cropped close, his clothes unremarkable. His posture was relaxed, and his hazel eyes gleamed with a feral intensity that no human could replicate. As Beauregard expounded on ancient rituals, Pruett's lips curled into a faint smirk. He blended in so well he disappeared. That was intentional. He sat in the third row with a worn leather notebook resting in his lap, a notebook he'd taken from a man whose body now floated beneath the Seine. The ticket to the lecture had been on that same man's corpse, along with his blood. Pruett wasn't here for enlightenment. He was here for the speaker, and where the others saw wisdom, he saw something else entirely. Potential. Power. And perhaps, if he allowed himself the indulgence, beauty. Either way, the speaker was magnificent. While Beauregard spoke of arcane channels and spiritual harmonics, Pruett tapped his finger idly on the notebook's corner. He tilted his head, watching the Dorvo elder with the fascination of a naturalist watching a rare predator. Beauregard's gaze flicked to him briefly, but it was enough. The Dorvo vampire's expression didn't falter, but his words slowed. Pruett's presence caused a disruption in his cadence. He recovered instantly. When the lecture concluded, the audience erupted into murmured discussions. Some lingered, eager to approach Beauregard with questions, while others filtered out into the night. Beauregard, ever patient, remained at the front of the room, engaging humans with his characteristic charm. Pruett decided to wait until the last of the humans departed, leaving him alone with the Dorvo vampire. That's when he rose, and in slow footsteps he approached him. "I know you, Pruett, Lamia demon." "And I know of you, monsieur," Pruett replied. "I've heard about your lectures. Such illuminating discourse, but you neglected to mention the role of intent in transmuting essence. Surely that was no oversight." Beauregard's expression remained guarded and curious. "You speak as one familiar with the subject." Pruett's smirk deepened. Familiarity is an understatement. Intent, after all, is everything. Without it, essence dissipates, does it not? "I see you have a mind of a speaker. It's rare for demon." Pruett stepped closer, arms folded behind his back. And it's rare for a Dorvo vampire to lecture humans in such a manner, is it not? For a moment, they regarded each other in silence until Beauregard finally nodded, his tone neutral. Both are such oddities. Yet, you speak as one familiar with such matters. Pruett tilted his head, eyes gleaming. Familiarity is an understatement. Intent is everything. Without it, essence doesn't bind. It dissipates, flees. He smiled. Even a Dorvo should know that. They stood in a moment of quiet regard, each sizing the other. Not like enemies. Not yet. But like duelists circling the same map. Pruett stepped to the side, sweeping his arm as if presenting a stage. I would love to discuss your stance further. That is, if you're willing. Ah, Beauregard replied with a smile. My private study would provide a more suitable venue. Pruett gestured grandly. Lead the way, monsieur. After a few moments, Pruett followed the Dorvo vampire through the back of the hall. The chandelier flickered once more, casting long shadows behind them as the lecture hall faded from view. Some men seek wisdom, some seek power, and some seek possession. Beauregard did not yet know which one walked behind him. But he would. Soon. Previously on Pruett's Sinister Escapades. Paris, 1846. Beneath the city's brilliance and beauty lies something older, deeper, more dangerous. At the heart of it all is Monsieur Beauregard, a Dorvo vampire cloaked in intellectual charm, whose lectures on spiritual alchemy draw Paris's brightest minds. But behind the salon doors and candlelit lectures, he guards something more valuable than knowledge, something Pruett, the infamous Lamia Demon, now seeks. Drawn to whispers of ancient power, Pruett blends in among the mortal crowd, hiding fangs behind wit, madness behind charm. The lecture is only the beginning. By night's end, Pruett follows the Dorvo vampire into the shadows, his true intent concealed beneath civility. A game has begun between two immortals, one of patience, intellect, and obsession. But only one will leave the board whole. Episode 2. The Price of Bones. Beauregard's study was a world apart from the lecture hall above, a sanctuary hidden deep within the catacombs of Paris. The cool air was scented with the faint metallic tang of ancient stone. The chamber was vast, its walls lined with bookshelves that climbed toward the arched ceiling. Thousands of books in dozens of languages filled the shelves, their spines faded with time. Artifacts rested on pedestals scattered throughout. Pruett entered slowly. His hazel eyes moved hungrily across the room. So many things to preserve. So many things to become. His fingers itched to touch, to claim, to understand. Here, his curiosity nearly got the best of him, as his thoughts turned from playing his demented game to learning about what was in the room. Beauregard said nothing at first. I must question, Pruett spoke, why you accepted my request so easily. You know who I am. I know what you are, Beauregard replied, and I'm not afraid of you. He closed the heavy oak door behind them. I am old enough to kill you before you can comprehend. Yes, yes, Pruett replied, but I'm not here for that. I'm here for knowledge. Knowledge is a treasure, but also a burden. Every piece here has its cost. Pruett laughed softly, his voice echoing in the cavernous space, spoken like a man who guards his secrets too closely. Then I ask you, speak plainly. What did you come for? As I said, knowledge, Pruett replied, Knowledge of the bone. You know of the bone? Pruett nodded. Yes, I know of it, and I would like to see it. Beauregard hesitated. As you mentioned, you are old enough to end me. You have nothing to fear. Beauregard moved toward an iron chest set against the far wall. The chest was unadorned but imposing, its surface marred with faint scratches from centuries of use. With practiced precision, he knelt before it, unlocking the ancient mechanisms with a series of fluid motions. Click, click, click. Inside, he withdrew a rectangular glass case. A bone fragment lay within, smaller than a man's thumb. Ah, that's it, isn't it? What's left of the progenitor of your bloodline? Pruett leaned forward slightly. Of every Dorvo in existence, Beauregard replied. Such a small piece, is it not? Small, yes, but important. Not some mystical relic, just a bone. A pinky finger. Pruett blinked, then leaned forward. A pinky? That's it? Just one of few remaining. There are only 6 pieces known to remain, and I've found one. Pruett's grin faltered. 6, he whispered. So the story really is scattered. Scattered, yes, Beauregard replied. Some say buried with kings, others lost to time. All are better left unfound. Pruett tilted his head, his mind racing with possibilities. Imagine, not power, but permanence, a whole legacy bottled. He crouched to get a better look. Fascinating, he murmured, but his mind was already spinning. To have just one piece of a being as ancient and powerful as the first Dorvo vampire, it was too much to ignore. Beauregard carefully placed the case back into the chest. Finding each bone has been my life's work. They are symbols of hope, but also of caution. Pruett rose, brushing dust from his coat. Caution? Oh, monsieur. Power never waits for caution. It finds the bold, the curious. Beauregard regarded him carefully, the faintest trace of unease flickering in his eyes. You are bold, Demhan, but boldness without wisdom is a dangerous thing. He hesitated, then added, especially now, with Leonis watching from the shadows. He has no taste for war, but if pushed, he will act. And when he does, it will be swift. Pruett's eyes gleamed. Leonis, the heir in hiding, does he still haunt the catacombs with his brother in tow? Luke remains close, Beauregard replied. Loyalty binds them. But Leonis, he is more than you think, and less forgiving than I am. Pruett chuckled, his usual smirk returning. Danger and I are well acquainted. I find it odd that you would be interested in something like this without a callous plan in play. I am a lover of history and lineage, Pruett replied. Of course, Demhan have a complicated history, filled with tales, lies, and half-truths. And your sire never told you of your history, never mentioned the very first demon, created by dark magic. Pruett shrugged. Why would she? A demon only truly cares about him or herself when it comes down to it. Their conversation continued long into the night, a dance of guarded revelations and veiled intentions. Beauregard spoke of ancient texts and hidden knowledge, of rituals too dangerous to perform. Pruett listened intently, filing away every detail, every hint of weakness. As the hours passed, a fragile camaraderie seemed to form between them, though it was built on mutual suspicion. Pruett's charm and wit were disarming, even for a Dorvo vampire as seasoned as Beauregard. Eventually, Pruett decided that it was best he left. The sun will be up in a few hours, he said. I am afraid that I must go." "I must say, you are a great comfort when time falls boring," Beauregard replied. "As are you." Pruett turned to leave, but paused. The bone still lingered on his mind. Soon he truly believed that possessing it was a chance to reshape his own little demented world. Being unpredictable and unrelenting, he intended to seize it. "Oh, one more thing." He spun on his heels to face his new target, who had his back to him. Pruett moved quick, and unfortunately, Beauregard turned too late. The knife rushed from left to right across his neck, just deep enough to do its job and injure the Dorvo well enough to make the fight somewhat even. Still, Beauregard moved fast with centuries of battle behind him. He caught Pruett's wrist, twisting hard. Bone cracked, but Pruett snarled, twisting loose with inhuman strength. He slammed Beauregard into a bookshelf, shattering wood and ancient bindings. Dust clouded the air like ash. The fight was brutal. Pruett fought like chaos incarnate, wild, erratic, brilliant. He didn't seek dominance, knowing that soon the wound would slow down his enemy. He sought breakage. Now, pinned against a toppled pedestal, Beauregard gritted his teeth as blood continued to run down his chest. "It seems you don't know me as well as you believed," Pruett said. "Oh, I do," Beauregard gasped. "I just didn't think you'd be this careless." "That's the difference, isn't it?" "We demon are careless." Pruett stepped back, releasing him. He watched while Beauregard grasped his neck and staggered briefly before falling to the floor. "Never turn your back on a demon," Pruett whispered, as he watched Beauregard beginning to melt right before his eyes. However, there was something he wanted. Something he needed. And if he was to get it, he had to move quicker than death itself. If it was possible for a pinky bone of the very first Dorvo to survive, perhaps something would survive from Beauregard as well. Quickly he eyed the room, finding what he thought was formaldehyde on a nearby shelf. He then grasped a large jar and set it near the body. At first he wanted the hands, but he moved too late. The arms were a no-go, so he took what hadn't been marked by the rapid decay of death. His head. He filled the jar with the preserving liquid, and before decay could take the part he wanted, he collected it and stuffed it in the jar. The liquid spilled over the rim, but it was enough to handle the job. Pruett placed the lid on top, and he made his way to the chest where he grabbed the rectangular glass case, removing the bone. He held it up between his thumb and index finger, like a relic, like a promise. "Mine now," he whispered. He tucked it carefully into the pocket of his coat and grabbed the large jar. Fascinating. He studied Beauregard's lifeless eyes, staring back at him. "I must truly thank you for the lesson, monsieur. It is one I will not forget." You've been listening to The Price of Bones, Episode 2 of Pruett's Sinister Escapades. One relic claimed, one legacy shattered, and Pruett is just getting started. This is Dark Magic Stories, where the past doesn't stay buried. Previously on Pruett's Sinister Escapades. Beneath the catacombs of Paris, Pruett found more than books and relics. He found temptation. Monsieur Beauregard welcomed the Diman into his hidden sanctuary, a vast vault of knowledge, where bone and history held weight equal to blood. Among his collection, a single fragment, what remained of the first Dorvo vampire, caught Pruett's hungry eye. Their exchange was civil until it wasn't. Curiosity gave way to violence, and in a storm of shattered shells and blood-slicked stone, Beauregard fell, too slow, too trusting, and far too late to see Pruett's true intent. Now the bone is gone. And so is Beauregard, at least most of him. A jar remains, a keepsake, and Pruett's collection has only just begun. Episode 3. The Head in the Jar. Pruett's sanctuary lay far from the bustling streets of Paris, deep in the countryside where no mortal dared to venture. The crumbling remains of an abandoned monastery served as his lair, its hallowed halls a haven for his macabre obsessions. Inside, the main chamber was alive with flickering candlelight, casting shadows over the rows of glass cases lining the walls. The monastery's interior was a macabre gallery, a stage covered in tables laden with jars, each containing preserved remains of various supernatural creatures. A witch's hand, a vampire's fangs, a demon's eye. Each piece was meticulously labelled, their preservation flawless. Shelves cluttered with stolen scrolls, scattered pages, dried herbs, broken mirrors, and worse. More jars, some filled with unidentifiable organs or fluid, others empty but labelled with names. The air was thick with the acrid scent of chemicals, herbs, and decay. Yet each case held a grim trophy. Preserved hands, blackened hearts, and other remnants of lives stolen in the name of his twisted pursuits. Tonight, though, a new centerpiece took his attention. Beauregard's head, severed with precision, rested in its jar on top of a blood-red velvet cushion. Pruett carefully removed it and went to work quickly. His fingers applied a mixture of alchemical agents to the neck wound. He treated the head as though it were alive, his gaze flicking between its serene features and the bone shard resting nearby. Occasionally, he paused, tilting his head, as if listening to a whisper only he could hear. This was no art. This was preservation. "Don't rot yet, monsieur," Pruett whispered. "I still have questions. You still have answers." When the preservation now complete, the head appeared eerily lifelike, its expression calm and dignified, as though Beauregard were merely in deep thought. After sealing the jar for the final time, Pruett stepped back, wiping his hands on a stained cloth, and admired his work. Magnificent. Even in death, you command respect. He poured himself a glass of absinthe from a crooked bottle, lifting it in a toast to the severed head. "I did it cleanly, you know. No theatrics, just precision. You would have appreciated that." He then paused. "What was that?" He titled his head slightly. "Monsieur, you should be honored. I don't preserve just anyone." He leaned closer, as if expecting the head to whisper back. A long silence stretched, broken only by the creaking groan of wood above and the whisper of wind through a shattered, stained glass window. And then, "Is that so?" Pruett replied to nothing. He then nodded, smiled faintly. "Of course you'd say that. Always the doubter." The one-sided conversation continued. Pruett paced the room as he spoke with Beauregard's severed head, pausing at times to listen, nod, argue. "No, I'm not reckless. You just never had the stomach to try something new." Silence. "You think it's madness, don't you?" More silence. "Well, I think it's vision." He turned sharply. "Don't look disappointed in me. Then again, you always were a bit of a snob, from the rumors I've heard." He nodded to himself. "I'm going to find the other pieces. 5, right?" The head, still and silent, watched with empty eyes. "You'd hate it," Pruett whispered. "The mess, the blood, the possibility." He leaned closer once more, a whisper in the dark. "But that's what makes it fun." He pulled a strip of dark cloth over the top of the glass case, securing it gently like a funeral veil. "There now. You always liked overseeing things, didn't you?" You're quieter now. But I imagine that won't last. He stared at it for a few seconds before removing the veil. Yes, I did kill you. But only because it is what demons do. A pause, and I wanted a piece of the great Dorvo. Another pause. You were going to lock it away forever. A waste, a sin, really. He cocked his head as if listening. Oh, come now, don't be so dramatic. You're not dead. Not to me. Silence. You don't have to answer. I'll answer for you. That's what friends do. We are friends now. Friends for eternity. He raised the jar in the air. Beauregard's head looked peaceful now. Regal. You really thought you were the clever one, didn't you? Hoarding the bone. That's where we're alike. We both crave the edge. You spoke of warnings. I speak of opportunities. And between us, I think I'm the only one listening now. You've been listening to The Head in the Jar, Episode 3 of Pruett's Sinister Escapades. Even in death, some voices refuse to be silenced. Last time on Dark Magic Stories, Pruett's Sinister Escapades. Pruett retreated to his lair in the countryside, an abandoned monastery lined with relics of the dead and supernatural. There, he preserved the severed head of Beauregard and placed it among his trophies. But something strange began to unfold. Pruett started speaking to the head, and perhaps hearing it speak back. Madness, memory, or something darker. One thing became clear. Pruett now has the bone, and a new obsession. Episode 4. The collection begins. The following night the monastery was cloaked in mist, the soft rustle of leaves the only sound as Pruett made his way home. Moonlight filtered through the treetops, casting fractured beams across his face and illuminating the unnatural gleam in his charcoal black eyes. He had just fed, yet he couldn't wait to return home to Monsieur. He pushed open the doors and the hinges groaned in protest. I am back, he spoke to the preserved head, still in its sealed jar. You miss me? Pruett tilted his head, his grin softening into something resembling admiration. Ah, Monsieur, even in death, you're magnificent. No reply. You're quiet this evening. Plotting again? Or simply enjoying the silence? Again, the head offered no reply, and yet, in the labyrinth of Pruett's mind, it spoke. You should not have done it, Pruett. The Dorvo vampires will come. Pruett grinned. Let them come. You've gone too far. I was a pillar. My death will not go unanswered. Ah, Monsieur, you always did enjoy the sound of your own voice. The whisper grew louder, the words twisting through his mind. Beauregard's tone was accusatory, mocking, but also laced with something else. Pity. You think this is victory? All you've done is paint a target on your back. Pruett laughed. If they do come, perhaps we should prepare a proper welcome, Something memorable. The whisper faded, but the grin on Pruett's face only widened. Anyway, tell me, old friend, how does it feel to be part of my collection? Again, it was only silence, until a cold gust of air swept through the room, snuffing out several candles. Pruett didn't flinch. He knew the presence behind him without turning. Pruett. It was the voice of his demon sibling, the one who was best known for interrupting his fun. Julian, Pruett replied, have you come to see the newest part of my collection? The Dorvo, no, Julian said flatly. Beauregard's death didn't go unnoticed. His absence is a roar in the silence. You've gone too far." Pruett's eyes gleamed with something feral. "Have I?" He stepped further into the room. Leonis is no longer in hiding. He's taken his brother Luke and begun calling old allies. That should terrify even you. He smiled wider. "Then let him come. I've always wanted to meet the quiet one. I warned you about going down this path. Your activities are drawing attention. The wrong kind." Pruett turned to face him and gestured grandly at the rows of heads. "Look at them, brother. Aren't they magnificent? Each one tells a story, a life preserved for eternity. Shouldn't we all aspire to such immortality?" Julian stepped forward, boots crunching against broken stone. "They'll come for you. Marcella's already calling for blood. You've killed her beloved. You've killed their king. I've done nothing but preserve what others would have let rot. Look at this place. Forgotten. Hollow. I simply filled the void." Julian's jaw clenched. "This obsession of yours, relics, heads, bones, it's not preservation. And yet, you came all this way just to see it." Pruett smiled. "Tell me, what does that say about you?" "I came here to warn you," he replied, "and to tell you to come home. Your words are wasted. You don't understand what you've unleashed." "I don't care, brother. This isn't a game." Julian's voice echoed through the chamber. "They'll come for you. For us." Pruett's expression darkened. "Let them try," he muttered. "I've outlived countless threats, brother. They are no different." Julian sighed, his patience waning. "This isn't just about you. Your recklessness puts all of us at risk. The dictum exists for a reason, Pruett. If you keep defying it—" "I know the dictum better than you," Pruett snapped, his voice rising. "I'm not some mindless minion to be lectured. I am your equal." "You're my burden," Julian said coldly. "And if you don't stop, I'll do what Delphine should have done centuries ago." At the mention of their sire, Pruett's manic grin returned, but there was a flicker of something else in his eyes. Fear? Or anger? "Tell me, brother, does she whisper her threats to you in the dead of night? Does she remind you who you owe your miserable existence to?" Julian didn't respond, but his silence spoke volumes. Pruett laughed, a hollow, unsettling sound. "Ah, I see. Still her loyal dog, are you? While I've moved beyond her petty rules, you remain shackled by them." Julian turned to leave, his patience exhausted. "Return what remains to the Dorvo vampires, or we'll face consequences you can't imagine." As the heavy doors slammed shut behind him, Pruett turned back to Monsieur. "Consequences," he murmured, his voice low. "You're wrong, brother. I can imagine them all too well." He tilted his head back. "Did you hear him, Monsieur? How they still cling to their old codes. They're brittle, dusty, like bones left too long in the sun." You've been listening to The Collection Begins, Episode 4 of Pruett's Sinister Escapades. The dead are stirring, and Pruett is already listening. Previously on Dark Magic Stories, Pruett's Sinister Escapades. Pruett returned to his sanctuary, speaking once more to the preserved head of Beauregard, his Monsieur. But he wasn't alone for long. Julian, his Demon sibling, arrived with a warning. The Dorvo vampires know. Beauregard was no ordinary elder. He was their king. And now, Leonis and his allies are preparing for war. But Pruett, ever defiant, refuses to back down. And the collection has only just begun. Episode 5. The Dorvo Response. Beneath the Basilica of Saint-Denis, The Dorvo vampires gathered in their most sacred chamber. The air was heavy with incense, the flickering light of a central candelabra casting elongated shadows on the ancient stone walls. At the center of the room stood Marcella, the newly declared Queen of the Dorvo Coven, her regal form wrapped in a deep crimson cloak that billowed slightly as she moved. "Beauregard has been taken from us," she declared, her voice cutting through the murmurs of the gathered brethren. "This is not just an act of violence. It is an insult, an affront to our bloodline, to our legacy." Flanking her stood two figures, Leonis and Luke. The brothers had long advised the court from the shadows, but now they stood at Marcella's side, one a whisper of warning, the other a voice of action. "There are no witnesses," Leonis said quietly. "Only aftermath. His body was violated, his head taken." Marcella turned to him. "You think I don't see the obvious? This was no accident. The Lamia, Pruett, was the last to be seen near his chambers. That is not a coincidence." Luke stepped forward. "It wasn't just death. It was a declaration. He took the head, Marcella, preserved it. That's no kill. That's a message." "Then we'll answer it," Marcella said, "with fire if necessary." Leonis's brow creased. "And what message will we send if we respond like savages? The humans already whisper. Another act of violence will draw attention we can't afford." "This isn't just violence," Marcella snapped. "It's demon desecration. He took more than a life. He took our king and mocked his memory." Luke folded his arms, glancing at his brother. "You always were the patient one." Leonis met Marcella's gaze. "We should be precise. Find the demon. Demand restitution. Make him return what he stole." Marcella tilted her head slightly, considering. "And if he refuses?" Leonis hesitated. "Then we remove him." "Good," she replied. "Then we're aligned." Paris changed in the wake of Beauregard's death. By night, the city pulsed with tension as cloaked figures moved through the labyrinthine alleys and shadowed catacombs. The Dorvo vampires were relentless, their sharp eyes scanning every corner, their whispers spreading fear among the supernatural underworld. Marcella moved like a spectre through the streets, her cloak trailing behind her, as she interrogated informants and cornered mortals with ties to Demon. Leonis followed often at her side, quiet but watchful, while Luke moved separately, always hunting. In a dimly lit apothecary in the Marais, Marcella confronted an old alchemist known to dabble in supernatural dealings. "Pruett," she hissed. "Where is he?" The alchemist trembled, clutching the counter. I don't know. He moves often, always unpredictable, but someone came by. Said if anyone came looking for him, to pass along a message." Marcella leaned closer, her eyes narrowing. "Who?" The alchemist hesitated. "A demon. Male. Pale, dark-haired, well-dressed. He didn't give his name, but he said he was Pruett's brother." Leonis exchanged a glance with Luke. "Julian," he said under his breath. "And what was the message?" Marcella demanded. The alchemist pointed shakily to a ledger on the counter. He said, "If you want information on Pruett's whereabouts, to meet him at Maison de Benediction. Alone, if possible." Marcella's lips curled into a snarl, and she released him with a sharp shove. "Pray that your information proves useful, and that this is not a trap. If so, I will be back for your head." As Marcella stormed out of the apothecary, Leonis and Luke fell into step on either side of her. "You trust this lead?" Leonis asked quietly. Marcella didn't slow her stride. "I trust that someone wants me to follow it. and I'm in the mood to oblige." Luke scoffed. "Julian's clever, but not that clever. If he's luring us out, he's already underestimated you." Marcella's eyes narrowed. "He's stalling. Pruett's done something. Julian's protecting him." "Or regretting it," Leonis added. "Julian's not the same as his brother. He may want this resolved without blood." "There's no such thing," Luke muttered. "Not with Pruett." Marcella didn't argue. "If Julian has answers, he'll give them to me. If not," her voice turned sharp, "then I'll rip the truth from whatever's left." Leonis exhaled through his nose. "Subtle as always." "And effective," she shot back. "I've waited long enough." Luke's grin was grim. "Then let's knock on the door." The hunt was far from over, but the Dorvo vampires had one undeniable advantage: time. They were patient, relentless, and now angry. You've been listening to The Dorvo Response, Episode 5 of Pruett's Sinister Escapades. The Dorvo are coming, and Pruett's sanctuary may not stay hidden for long. Welcome to Dark Magic Stories. Tonight's tale, The Chateau Accord, Episode 6 of Pruett's Sinister Escapades. The Dorvo demand justice. Julian offers a location, but even truth has a cost, and not everyone walks away clean. Let the accord begin. Episode 6. The Chateau Accord. Maison de Benediction lay in still silence, cold, quiet, and shadow-draped, far removed from the clamour of Paris. Though once a haven for reflection and restraint, tonight it held tension like a blade. Marcella entered first, her boots echoing on the stone floor of the main hall. Leonis followed, more subdued, his hands folded behind his back, his eyes scanning the room like a scholar dissecting a battlefield. Luke brought up the rear, restless energy rippling through his posture. His boots struck the stone with a different rhythm, one meant to be heard. Julian waited until they were halfway across the hall before he finally spoke. "You didn't kill the alchemist, did you? He has his uses." Marcella ignored the jab. "You know why we're here." Julian gave a faint, humorless smile. "To threaten? To demand? To pretend this is still diplomacy?" Leonis stepped forward, voice low but firm. "We want answers, Julian. That's not a threat. That's necessity." Julian met his gaze. "And if the answers aren't tidy? What then?" "Then we adjust," Leonis replied evenly. Luke crossed his arms. "We aren't here to barter with riddles." Marcella stopped just a few feet away from Julian. Her voice was ice. "Where is Pruett?" Julian inhaled slowly. The scent of dust and memory clung to the air. For a moment he said nothing, just studied her face, the iron in her spine, the grief barely hidden behind fury. Her tone sharpened. "He killed a king, desecrated his body. If you're protecting him, you're complicit." Julian's eyes flickered. "Complicit implies choice. I didn't ask for this." "But you haven't stopped him," Luke said, stepping forward. "I rarely can," Julian replied. "He's always been uncontrollable." Marcella's patience thinned. "Then tell us where he is. Now." "You want a location?" he asked quietly. "Coordinates? A map? You think this ends with directions?" "I think it starts there," she snapped. "And if you're shielding him—" Julian cut her off, not with anger, but with exhaustion. "I'm not shielding him. I never could." He turned from them, facing one of the tall windows. Light bled through the coloured glass, painting cracked stone in reds and greens. He was always like this, even before Paris, before Endor. Chaos in a fine coat. Luke scoffed. Then help us end it. Julian's voice lowered. And what will that earn me? A chance to live, Leonis answered simply. Julian smirked faintly, but there was no warmth in it. You always did know how to cut to the root. Where is he? Marcella repeated, fangs bared. He looked down at the edge of the long table, his fingers tracing the grooves of the wood like one might a memory. There's an old monastery, near the ruins of St. Ilde's Cathedral, southwards, forgotten by most. Pruett's made it his gallery. Marcella's lips pulled back in a snarl. His charnel house, you mean? Julian nodded once. Yes, that too. She stepped closer. He's hiding behind relics and rot. He calls it collecting, Julian said. You call it desecration. He sees no difference. Why tell us now? Leonis asked. Why not weeks ago? Julian turned, finally meeting their eyes again. His voice was soft. Because I wanted to believe he'd stop. I always do. Then we go, Marcella said, turning toward the doors. Not yet. Not tonight, Julian called after her. Going before midnight is best. She looked over her shoulder. You expect me to wait until tomorrow? I expect you to live, Julian replied. Storming in early only ensures your death, or worse, his escape. Fine, tomorrow then, and you're coming with us. Julian didn't move. No, I want no part in this. Marcella stepped toward him again, her fangs barely visible. You're already part of this. I said no. Julian stood his ground. Do what you must, but I will not be part of it. A long silence stretched between them, until eventually Marcella turned and left the room with Leonis and Luke close behind. Julian stood alone once more in the quiet of his home. And now, he whispered to no one, we see where your madness leads us, brother. You've been listening to The Chateau Accord, Episode 6 of Pruett's Sinister Escapades. The line between diplomacy and war thins, and Julian's silence may cost him more than loyalty. Welcome to Dark Magic Stories. Tonight's tale, A Brother's Squabble, Episode 7 of Pruett's Sinister Escapades. While the Dorvo prepare for war, Pruett dreams of bone fragments and destiny. Julian brings a warning, but it may already be too late. What happens when a brother's love becomes a burden? Let the squabble begin. Episode 7, A Brother's Squabble. Unaware, or perhaps unconcerned, about the storm brewing against him, Pruett continued his experiments with Monsieur. The preserved head of Beauregard, resting in its glass jar, had become more than a trophy. It was a companion, an artifact that seemed to grow more animated with each passing day. While he slept earlier that day, Pruett began to experience what he called visions. Whether they were remnants of Beauregard's consciousness or the product of his fractured mind was unclear. The head's whispers, faint at first, grew louder, weaving through his thoughts with the persistence of a melody that couldn't be silenced. You see, monsieur, Pruett said as he awoke that night, your people think they can contain me. But chaos isn't something you contain. It's something you harness. Beauregard's voice, if it was indeed his voice, responded, the words twisting through Pruett's mind like smoke. The whispers spoke of power, of destiny, of a world remade in chaos. Pruett's obsession deepened, his focus narrowing to a single, maddening goal, finding the remaining bone fragments of Dorvo. He had become convinced that the fragments, scattered across the globe, held the key to ultimate power. To control Dorvo, the progenitor of the vampire race, was to command all his descendants. The thought consumed him. Still, he went about his night. He left briefly and fed indiscriminately, only to return half an hour later. He then proceeded to adjust the bindings on a human's eye, floating in preservation fluid. Monsieur's whisper surged, louder and clearer than ever. Enough of this. The fragments await. Claim them. Pruett froze, his fingers twitching. A slow, crooked smile spread across his face. You're right, monsieur. That is now my duty, after all. He chuckled, tapping the glass gently with the edge of his fingernail before his hazel eyes gleamed with manic glee. Just then he picked up on Julian's scent, which made him look over his shoulder. The door to the ruined monastery creaked open. Julian stepped inside alone, shoulders soaked in fatigue. Pruett spread his arms wide in mock welcome. Ah, my dear brother, how lovely of you to grace me with your presence again, just as I have some exciting news to share with you. Julian crossed the threshold and cast a glance at the collection along the shelves, preserved demon remains, cursed objects, pieces of forgotten lore. He said nothing. Pruett could feel his disgust radiating like heat. I have decided to leave Paris in search of the remaining bones, he revealed. Remaining bones? Julian questioned. Why, yes. You know, before I decapitated Monsieur, he told me there were a total of 6 bone fragments of Dorvo. He had one, which is now mine. I aim to find the remaining 5. There, I said it. I said it, and you heard it. And what is our business with that? Pruett gestured to Beauregard's head with a dramatic flourish. It is merely one piece of the puzzle, a single step in a much grander plan. And that is? Shh, Pruett quieted him. Let Monsieur tell you. Instead, Julian only heard silence, but in Pruett's mind, he heard laughter. Warm, mocking. Beauregard's voice again, encouraging and accusatory all at once. He tilted his head as if listening. Mm-hmm. Yes, especially her. Marcella always was a dramatic one. A low chuckle escaped him. Brother, you are truly mad. I heard that, Pruett said brightly. But don't worry. The madness is a feature, not a flaw. Keeps me interesting. I do not care for your antics. I've come to only give you a warning. Warning? Marcella will come tomorrow, with Leonis and Luke. They're not coming to talk. This ends tomorrow, one way or another. Pruett didn't flinch. Then let them come. Julian's voice cracked. You need to stop all of this. The collection, the murders, the death. How long have you been at it? Centuries. Centuries. I've seen what this is doing to you. Doing to me, Pruett echoed. Brother, it's completing me. Julian stepped forward. You killed a king. I've killed dozens, Pruett said flatly. Kings, queens, matriarchs. Remember Endor? Remember the Vault of Skulls? This isn't new for me. This is different, Julian said. We aren't living in those times anymore. Pruett tilted his head. You say that like it's a weakness. Because it is, Julian snapped. You think you're preserving legacy, but you're just hoarding death. Pruett smiled faintly. Legacy is made of death. Julian's voice dropped. I gave them your location. I told them where to find you. Pruett blinked, then nodded slowly. I know. How else would they have found me? You're not angry. Why would I be? Pruett said. Of all the things you could have done, this one makes sense. Besides, he gestured casually, who else has the stomach to face a Dorvo queen head-on? Julian didn't respond. You've seen it, haven't you? Pruett continued. Marcella is the new queen with no experience. Leonis hides behind codes. Luke swings his sword like a blunt hammer. But me? He leaned closer. I've never needed an army. I just need a sharp edge and the will to use it. And if they kill you? Julian asked quietly. Then remember me like I remember Monsieur. He pointed at the glass jar. And keep me close to him. We still have many stories to share. Brother, Julian whispered, shaking his head. You are truly a psychopath. Pruett's grin widened. I preserved him. Look at him, immortalized forever. Isn't that what we all crave? When they come, you must hand over his head. Pruett's brow arched. Such a dull word. Hand over. Sounds like surrender. Let's call it a donation. You mustn't continue this. Abandon your macabre tendencies and come with me, he pleaded. You do not have to leave Paris. Stay with me at Maison de Benediction. This is my home, Pruett replied. If I remain in Paris, I remain here. Everything I want is here. Why hold on to something so grotesque? Julian asked. Pruett's grin wavered. For a moment, something close to sincerity passed through his expression. Because parting with genius is never easy. But fine, I will hand over what's left of him, if that will make you content. Perhaps they will find his conversations comforting. But I will keep the bone of their beloved savior. Julian turned away, the weight of his brother's madness too much to bear. But before he could leave, Pruett added softly, Thank you for telling them. Julian looked back, confused. You mean that? Pruett smiled, tired, wicked, maybe even sincere. It's no fun if they don't come. Julian stared for a long moment, then walked away without another word. The door closed behind him with a hollow thud. Pruett returned to his desk, hands steady. Tomorrow, he whispered. Let's see who survives the story. You've been listening to A Brother's Squabble, Episode 7 of Pruett's Sinister Escapades. Julian has made his choice. The Dorvo are on their way. And Pruett, he's waiting, smiling, eager to see how the story ends. The final confrontation draws near. Some truths can't be buried. Some monsters don't run. Welcome to Dark Magic Stories. Tonight's tale, The Handover, Episode 8 of Pruett's Sinister Escapades. Rain falls over Paris, old loyalties splinter. And in a sanctum built of relics and ruin, Pruett faces those who would see him end. But when obsession takes root, it does not surrender quietly. Episode 8. The Handover. The confrontation came not in some abandoned manor or ceremonial hall, but in the heart of Pruett's sanctum, a crumbling cathedral-turned laboratory in the forgotten fringe of Paris, its stained glass shattered and replaced with shelves of specimens and occult relics, a perfect place for old monsters to bargain. Candles burned low in iron sconces. The cold air reeked of vinegar, ash, and ancient blood. And yet, Pruett looked at ease, fingertips drumming along the lid of Monsieur's jar, humming softly to himself. The door groaned open. Marcella entered first, draped in black satin, her eyes sharp and cold. Leonis and Luke flanked her. None of them spoke at first. The silence was brittle, waiting to snap. Pruett smiled wide. Ah, the new queen arrives. I was beginning to worry you wouldn't show. Where is it? Marcella demanded. Monsieur and I were just reminiscing. He gestured to the glass jar. Still whispering secrets. if you listen close." Marcella's gaze locked on the jar. "You mock his death," she snarled. "No," Pruett said gently. "I revere it. His voice guides me. It always has." "This meeting is a formality," she said. "There will be no forgiveness." "I kept him preserved," Pruett replied with a grin. "You should thank me. Most decomposers wouldn't be so considerate." "You desecrated our king," she snapped. "You dissected him like a lab rat and carried his head around like a bauble." "I gave him purpose," Pruett said. "His voice has never been clearer. Listen close. You'll hear him." Leonis stepped forward. "Enough. You are deluded. A daemon who speaks to preserved heads." Pruett chuckled. "Ah, but even I remember. He told me secrets, you know, about your precious Dorvo, about the first vampire, about the bone he hid from even you." Marcella's eyes narrowed. "Bone?" "A piece of Dorvo himself," Pruett replied. "Monsieur had it, passed it to me. And now it is part of something larger." "You lie. He would have never done such a thing." "But he did." Marcella took another step forward, her fangs exposed. "I will kill you for what you've done." "You can try," Pruett whispered, "but I wouldn't recommend it." Without another word, she lunged with Dorvo's swiftness, inhuman, honed and lethal. But Pruett met her with equal force. He grabbed her throat mid-lunge and slammed her into a pillar so hard it cracked behind her. She clawed and kicked, her rage giving her strength, but he grinned. "Did you think I'd go quietly?" he whispered, then opened his mouth and fed. Psychic energy began to funnel from Marcella's mouth to his. Her eyes widened in horror, and her limbs twitched once, then convulsed. Luke roared and launched forward, Leonis at his side. They clashed with Pruett, blows fast and brutal in their attempt to rescue Marcella, but before they could, a blur of motion crashed between them. Pruett took in Julian's scent before the Dorvo brothers had a chance to respond. Julian grabbed Luke by the throat and threw him against a wall. He then struck Leonis, landed hard on his back. Teased by his display, Pruett's eyes turned stark black, a demon trait. "Brother, why I thank you for your appearance. I wasn't in need of a rescue." "Just," he scrunched his lips, "just get it over with." Pruett returned to his meal, sucking deep and fast. He felt her psychic essence recharging the dark magic in his body, and when he finally released her, Marcella collapsed to her knees. Her body shriveled and grey, a husk of who she'd been. Leonis jumped to his feet. "You killed her!" "I warned her. I warned you all!" Julian shot back. Luke pushed to his feet, fury burning in his eyes. "She was our queen." "Find a new one," Julian replied. "You," Pruett pointed at Leonis. "I think you would make an excellent Dorvo king." He tilted his head slightly right, although I don't think your head would look as good as Monsieur's in jar. "Be quiet, brother," Julian barked. They watched as Leonis turned to Luke. In their eyes, Pruett saw an agreement taking place, and it wasn't long before their desire to revenge Marcella's death dissipated away. Leonis looked not at Pruett, not at Julian, but at the jar. "I don't care about the head," he said, "or the bones, or revenge. I want peace." Pruett tilted his head. "Peace? If you leave Paris tonight, we'll say nothing of what happened here." Pruett looked between them, then to the jar. His fingers tapped its lid absently. "Tempting," he mused, "but I do tire of this city." The jar vibrated softly, and a whisper only he could hear coiled through his mind. "What say you, monsieur? Should we go?" He closed his eyes. Silence. Then, a whisper. Only he could hear it. His hand trembled for just a moment. Then he nodded. "You're right. There's more to find. Waiting is such boredom, especially when there are more bones to go." He cradled the jar with reverence and turned to Julian. "I guess thanking you for all this is in order?" "I didn't do it for you," Julian growled. "Just go." "I go, and you will finally get the peace you've craved for centuries." How touching. Without another word, he left his home, the place where his madness took root, with the jar nestled in his arms like a child. He stepped out into the Paris night. Rain had begun to fall. It slicked the rooftops and hissed against the cobblestones. He didn't look back. "Come now, monsieur," he whispered to the jar. "Curtains down. The critics are dead." The acquisition of Monsieur marked a turning point in Pruett's descent into madness. The head became his confidant, his partner in experiments, and, in many ways, his obsession. To the Demon, it was a grotesque trophy. To the man, and for Pruett, it was a masterpiece. In the years that followed, Pruett would claim that Monsieur spoke to him, sharing secrets and guiding him to greater heights of power. Whether this was true or a delusion mattered little. What was undeniable was the effect Monsieur had on Pruett's ambitions, fueling schemes that would shake the supernatural world. And through it all, the whispers of the preserved head echoed in Pruett's mind, blurring the line between ally and tormentor, mentor and victim. You've been listening to The Handover, Episode 8 of Pruett's Sinister Escapades. A queen is dead, a brother betrayed. And Pruett walks into the night with madness cradled in glass. The story may end here, but the whispers never do. To hear more episodes, be sure to follow Dark Magic Stories here on YouTube. Thanks for listening, and remember, some trophies should never be kept.